all of the tremendous support we receive in the execution of our mission, which is to increase the competitiveness of our HBCUs. During this session, we will call out individuals and organizations who, through their professional expertise and diligence, has helped in a big way to increase availability of resources and awareness of the importance of our schools to their local communities and indeed to our nation. While this virtual session is our adaptation to the current pandemic, we understand that it does not do justice to how grateful and pleased we are to have your continuing support. And now let me introduce the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs, Mr. Jonathan Holyfield.
Thank you, Arthur. Good morning, HBCU community, America, and the world. It is an honor to join you today. Under normal circumstances, we would make our annual Excellence in Innovation and Competitiveness Awards. Well, this year is different. Since we are not quite able to replicate the energy, the spirit, the conviviality, camaraderie of our signature awards, we have chosen instead to provide a robust, heartfelt day of thanks. And yes, we fully expect the return of the Excellence in Innovation and Competitiveness Awards in 2021. On a personal note, every day I wear many hats. Executive Director of the White House Initiative on HBCU, member of the White House Domestic Policy Council and Office of American Innovation, chair of the Federal HBCU Interagency Working Group, member of the President's Board of Advisors, member of the HBCU Capital Finance Program Advisory Board. In each of these capacities, I constantly pursue one big thing, HBCU competitiveness, improving conditions for HBCU to win public and private investment to meet student needs and promote community prosperity. Accordingly, a great deal of my time is spent with federal and non-federal partners asking, inquiring, positioning, requesting, pushing, encouraging. So many times, our partners have responded in extraordinary ways. Of course, I always say thank you for outstanding contributions, for meaningful effort, and for jobs well done. Today, however, is special, very special. Today, we exponentially increase our expression of thanks, our thank you to federal and non-federal partners, the people and organizations we recognize significantly support our efforts and add energy and expertise to what we do. Each member of the initiative team will now recognize and thank those in their respective areas. We will open with recognition of the President's Board of Advisors on HBCU from Seneca Franklin, designated federal official.
Thanks, Jonathan. As the designated federal official for the President's Board of Advisors on HBCUs, every 4 to 8 years, I am blessed to collaborate with a small cohort of business leaders, HBCU presidents, innovators, entrepreneurs, and education leaders who set aside time to advise the President of the United States and the Secretary of Education on all matters pertaining to HBCUs. This group has been a delight to work with. I'd like to personally thank each of them for their hard work and dedication to the mission. But before we move on, I want to toss it back to Jonathan for a quick word. Jonathan?
Thank you, Seneca. A special note of recognition for Bernard J. Bernie Milano, the former president of the KPMG Foundation and retired founding president of the PhD Project, a national program that has increased minority representation on business school faculty by over 400%. Mr. Milano holds an honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters from North Carolina A&T State University and is distinguished for twice serving on the President's Board of Advisors on HBCU, currently under President Trump and formerly under President George W. Bush. We recognize and thank Bernie for his extensive service. Back to you, Sedeka.
Thanks again, Jonathan. The initiative is charged with working with a range of public and private agencies, offices, philanthropic organizations, and other entities to increase the capacity of HBCUs. So when we decided to pivot to this virtual format, it made sense for the initiative to work with a few non-government organizations, and I'd like to highlight them at this time. So we'll start with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The initiative sends a special thank you to Ms. Clark and her team for continuing to provide perspectives on innovation and competitiveness in America. The discussions we've had on research and innovation at HBCUs have been superb and help to highlight how important it is to prepare our students for the jobs of the future. Next up, IBM Corporation. An additional special thank you to Belinda Scarborough Kennedy and the IBM Global University Programs team. A friend of HBCUs, Belinda has led the IBM Global University team to work with HBCU leadership, faculty, and students to provide resources that will undoubtedly bridge the gap between college and high-demand skills. If you missed her session, you will definitely want to go back to the Tuesday afternoon agenda to view the video. Last but not least, the Society for Human Resource Management, or as we call them, SHRM. We thank so many at SHRM for their steadfast support of HBCUs. They are developing scalable solutions to support displaced workers and creating models to assess HR functions at HBCUs. There's so much to share about SHRM, and we hope that you attended their session on Tuesday because they are creating plans and would like to work with you. So again, thank you to SHRM, IBM, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for lending their collective brainpower to this virtual conference. It is now my pleasure to ask my friend and colleague, Tammy Ferguson, to come forward for our public partner recognition. Tammy?
Thank you, Sedeka. Again, my name is Tammy Ferguson, and I'm the Intergovernmental Relations Coordinator for the White House Initiative on HBCUs. In my role, I have the pleasure of working with many of our federal agency partners across the spectrum of government. These dedicated individuals work tirelessly to not only ensure that HBCUs have equitable access to federal funds and programs, but that their role in the history of our nation is uplifted and known throughout their respective agencies. These individuals serve as advocates for our institutions, and the group's makeup is just as diverse as our institutions. We have doctors, educators, program analysts, and more lawyers than one can shake a stick at. The Interagency Working Group consists of representation from the following agencies: the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, U.S. Agency for Global Media, U.S. Agency for International Development, Appalachian Regional Commission, the Corporation for National and Community Service, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Defense, the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of the Interior, Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, the Department of State, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Veterans Affairs, Environmental Protection Agency, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, General Services Administration, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Labor Relations Board, the National Science Foundation, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Office of Personnel Management, Peace Corps, Social Security Administration, and Small Business Administration. As you can see, the work with the initiative stretches across the expanse of government, So at this time, I'd like to take some time to personally thank the members of the Interagency Working Group, as well as some other federal employees that play a substantial role in assisting the initiative in executing our mission. The initiative is grateful to have the opportunity to highlight some of these individuals today. My hope is that you take some time to review the presentation again at a later time to read the personal sentiments that they so eloquently express as to what the work means to them. The first person I'd like to recognize is from the U.S. Department of Education, Leslie B. Williams, still photographer, who so graciously captures the initiative's events, including our annual conference. Kynetta Lee, Equal Employment Opportunity Specialist from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Kynetta holds the distinction of always being one of the first individuals to submit submissions when data calls go out. Rachel Kenlaw Ramirez, Program Analyst from the Small Business Program Office at NIH, has literally grown up with the initiative, first connecting with us through her internship. We're so pleased that we have had the opportunity to continue to work with her years later. Kevin Jenkins, Intergovernmental Affairs Specialist from the Department of Justice, was one of the first people I met when I came to the initiative. He's a leading contributor to the weekly newsletter, and we thank him so much. Chris Elder, National Account Manager with General Services Administration, is one of our partners that assists us in navigating the often confusing world of federal contracting. Anyone who has attended any of our past in-person conferences can greatly appreciate the shout-out that we'd like to extend to Jermaine Sullivan, who was the former Deputy Director of Conference Policy and Operations at the U.S. Department of Education. Jermaine ensured that the conference events were executed smoothly, and quite honestly, he makes it look like an easy feat to pull off every year. Gabriella Harvey, the communications contractor at the National Endowment for the Humanities, is part of the hardworking team known as the Arts, History, and Culture Cluster. From the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, we'd like to extend thanks to our official liaison, Veronica Venture. Ms. Venture is always supportive of the initiative and has given her staff the freedom to creatively uplift our institutions through the various outreach events they sponsor throughout the year. Claudia Rankins, Program Director with the National Science Foundation, was one of the first people I met when I first joined the initiative. Claudia is one of those amazing people who's always willing to introduce students and interns to her often intimidating agency, but she automatically makes you feel at ease. She's been working with the initiative in official capacity for 10 years. Christopher Bourne, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Innovation at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, is one of my personal favorite liaisons. Chris is genuine and always accommodating and a joy to work with. I remember when Tom Lotito, a program manager for diversity and inclusion at the U.S. Department of Treasury, first joined the Interagency Working Group. It's often a bit overwhelming to get thrown into a large group like this, but Tom jumped in feet first and has been on top of his game ever since. I can also say the same thing for Mary Macklem, Senior Program Officer for the National Endowment for the Humanities. Mary is another individual who we can always rely on to work with interns and students and showcase the unique work of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Lynn Richmond, Communications and Public Affairs Specialist for the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, has been given the nickname of Little Steven Spielberg, as she's a pro at producing videos on behalf of her agency to showcase their work. They'll actually be treated to some of her handiwork in a few minutes. Angela Bumbry, the Director of the Office of Presidential Congressional Agency Liaison Services at the General Services Administration, is one of those passionate for the cause individuals who always holds her agency accountable for assisting our HBCUs. She keeps me on my toes, and she always reminds me to bring GSA into the fold. Michael Duke, 1890 National Scholarship Program Lead for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, holds a special place in my heart due to the immense responsibility he carries. USDA is one of the largest executive agencies with probably 1.5 million components under their umbrella. That's my personal estimation. That's a lot of people to keep track of and a lot of information to disseminate to. But somehow he does it, and he always does it with a smile. I don't know how you do it, Michael, but thank you. Harvey Johnson, Deputy Assistant Secretary, Resolution Management, Diversity and Inclusion at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, is another one of my all-star liaisons. Always accommodating, always plugged into the work, and always a genuinely wonderful person to work with. I don't really remember how I met Angela McDaniel, Diversity and Inclusion Lead for the Office of Apprenticeships for the Department of Labor, but all that I can say is that I'm grateful that I did. Angela may be in the running for the Perfect Attendance Award when it comes to initiative-related events. I've learned so much from her about the world of apprenticeship. I kind of feel like I did my own apprenticeship underneath her. The next individual we'd like to recognize is Paula R. Bruner, Appeals Attorney for the Office of Federal Operations at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. There's not much to say about Paula. Just kidding. Paula Bruner is our unofficial team member. She keeps us on our toes and is always the first person to send us breaking HBCU-related news and has a knack for finding even the most obscure opportunities for HBCU students to take advantage of. Everybody knows this. We love Paula. Monique Toussaint, the Senior Advisor for the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans at the U.S. Department of Education, has been holding down her initiative single-handedly for the past few years while providing support to ours at the same time. She's a great thought partner and a wonderful colleague at the U.S. Department of Education and can always be called upon to assist us during conference season. Beatrice Wilson is cooler than the shade the trees her agency protects. Ms. Wilson is the Assistant Director of Cooperative Forestry at the U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service, and in that role has helped us with the most random projects one could possibly think of, like requiring memorial trees for our campuses. Always one to lend a hand and assist others, we're grateful to have the privilege to call her a friend of the initiative. Julia Nguyen, Senior Program Officer for the National Endowment for the Humanities, is also part of the amazing team members at the National Endowment for the Humanities. She's been integral to producing conference-related materials for the Arts, Culture, and History cluster. I remember when Lisa Bishop, Director of Grant Administration at the Corporation for National and Community Service, first came on board. I might have accidentally bombarded her with a ton of information that would send any sane person running for the hills, but she didn't, and we're so glad that she didn't. Lisa is one of those partners you dream about having. She's always on top of things, dependable, and reflects the great qualities her agency seeks to uplift in our citizens. Supporting Lisa at the Corporation for National Community Service is Earl Gay, Senior Advisor. We appreciate his years of service and his support for the initiative. Jason Cottrell is our colleague over at the U.S. Department of Education. He's the lead research analyst with the Office of Post-Secondary Education. Jason is our official data guru, official conference tweeter, and designated initiative best friend. Mary Moran also jumped into her representative role recently and supports the Appalachian Regional Commission as a program analyst. It's important to note that the Appalachian Regional Commission is one of the initiative's oldest federal agency partners, and we're pleased to have her on board. Take a look at the number of years Ophelia Wilson, Grant Officer at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, has been supporting the initiative. 19 years is truly impressive, and she's one of those individuals whom you should go out of your way to meet. She's such a rich knowledge of the initiative and past programs designed to support HBCUs. She's also one of the first people I met in my role, and I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to work with such a lovely person over the years. Joanne Hill, Chief of the Office of Business Development at the Minority Business Development Agency at the Department of Commerce, stepped into her role and took off running. Joanne is thorough and a great communicator. She's really helped develop the relationship between the initiative and the Office of Minority Business Development, and we're grateful to have her as a partner. Tawanda Smith is the Manager of Affirmative Employment and Diversity Management Programs at the U.S. Department of Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Tawanda is another Gold Star representative that has been working with the initiative for well over a decade. Brilliant and always sharp, we're glad to know that we have a partner in Tawanda. Joel Harrell, Senior Advisor for Federal Student Aid at the U.S. Department of Education, has been a partner of the initiative for 15 years. He's the go-to expert on all things surrounding student aid, which you can imagine plays a significant role for our HBCU students. The initiative would be at a severe deficit if we did not have his assistance and partnership. If at any point our students have a question about federal employment, our go-to person would be Lawrence President, Senior Federal Recruitment Advisor for the Office of Personnel Management. Mr. President, who has the coolest name, by the way, assists the initiative by coordinating sessions focused on federal hiring and has been a valuable resource for our institutions and their students. Karen Dupree, Senior HR Program Specialist for the U.S. Agency for Global Media, has been playing double duty as both the liaison and the representative for her agency for the past 2 years. She is positioned at a very unique agency and thankfully adds a different perspective to the Interagency Working Group. Sharon Hilliard, Black Employment Program Manager at the Environmental Protection Agency, is one of our newbies. I first met Sharon at the conference last year, where she was seemingly at every single session, even those running concurrently. Not really sure how she did that. Sharon always brings an enthusiastic and positive attitude to the meetings, and we're happy to have her as a partner. I'm also pleased to recognize Ms. Annette Owen Scarborough, the Small Business Program Manager at National Institutes of Health. Annette is whip smart, knows her stuff, and is one of the most supportive individuals I've ever met. If you ever have any questions about contracting, she's a great person to know. Kevin Ford, Conference and Event Manager at the U.S. Department of Education, is also one of those magical beings who help run our conference smoothly. I love working with him because of his positive attitude and great personality. He's just one of those people you love being around. Jackie Williams, National Director of the Office of Rural Housing and Economic Development at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, is another example of an outstanding partner. Whenever I see her, she's always smiling, and she's so accommodating to the initiative and some of our out there requests. Evelyn Kent, the Director of the Department of Defense's Historically Black Colleges and Universities and Minority Servicing Institutions Program and Outreach, has been serving the initiative for 22 years. Let that soak in. When I first met Evelyn, I was seriously intimidated by her, but quickly grew to love her and her passion for the work. Yet another example of a brilliant mind, she and her knowledge of HBCUs and government programs is indispensable. The initiative is beyond fortunate to have Brita Sampson, Chief of the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, join our effort. Brita is the go-to expert for almost every request we have for the intelligence community. She's thoughtful and always on top of her game, and we hope she sticks around forever. Derek Allen, Human Resources Director at the U.S. Department of Transportation, is another example of one of our all-star newbies. I have to say I love having him around. He brings a curiosity and great work ethic that we love to see demonstrated in all of our partners. Mark Dan, Special Litigation Counsel in the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, may not know this, but he's seriously one of my favorite people to work with. He, like many of the millions of lawyers that we work with, always seems to ask the right questions, even the ones that I really hate looking into. But for him, I really don't mind. I love his dedication to the work, and he always gives great advice. Speaking of favorite people, I try not to be biased, but if you haven't caught on by now, I genuinely love working with everyone listed in this presentation, and Susan Glimcher is yet another example of that. I believe Susan originally sought out the initiative and demanded that we work with the ACHP, which she often states is the agency that no one knows anything about, but we do now. And I can tell you, all of the work they do around surrounding historic preservation. You cannot find a more passionate person than Susan, and my entire team can attest to that. Not only is she creative, she's a brilliant partner and a great friend as well. So as you can see, we have a myriad of partners, and this presentation only scratches the surface. I'd like to take this time to thank those individuals we did not get a chance to single out today. We honor and thank you as well. I look forward to the time when we can all reconvene so that we can thank you face to face for the tremendous work that you put in on a daily basis to support our institution. And with that, I'd like to pass the presentation back over to Dr. McMahon.
Thank you, Tammy. One of the most strategic decisions we've made over the past several years is the establishment of clusters. A cluster is a subgroup of the working group that has chosen to focus on a specific subject that is critically important to our mission. The subject areas arise organically from our members and will determine their own path and longevity. Currently, we have 8 functional clusters, and the clusters are campus safety and resilience, human capital, economic development, STEM, contracting, smart HBCU, humanities, arts and history, and international affairs. And at this time, what I would like to do is recognize the chairman of those clusters, a group of individuals who have stood up and took the challenge to lead these innovative HBCU competitive clusters. And if you'll follow along with me, I will read the name and the organization for each of them. From the U.S. Department of Energy, Trina Bilal. She's a program manager there. She's a chair or co-chair of 2 clusters, the Economic Development Competitive Cluster and the Contracting Cluster. Next, we have Ayanna Hudson, Arts Education Director for the National Endowment for the Arts. She's the chairman of the Arts, Culture, and History Cluster. Next, we have Mr. David Levin, Senior Program Manager, U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. He's the co-chairman of the working group's International Affairs Cluster. And David works along with John Watson, who's the Minority Serving Institution Coordinator at U.S. Agency for International Development. And next we have from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Gerald Bennett. He's the HUD STEM liaison. And next, of course, Daryl Stewart. Daryl is the branch chief at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and he's the chairman of the Human Capital Cluster. Next, I'd like to thank Dr. Francine Alfaswani from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration for her leadership and chairmanship of the Smart HBCU Cluster. Also, Francine is a former worker in our office at the initiative, and we appreciate all that she's done. And from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Michelle McGriff. She's a departmental special emphasis program manager, and she's the chairman or the co-chairman of the Campus Safety and Resilience Cluster, along with Calvin Hodnett from the Department of Justice. So thank you to all of the chairmen who have stood up, as I mentioned earlier, to lead those clusters, which are a very important strategic piece of our organization, and we cannot thank you enough. And next, we're going to have a short video, so sit back and enjoy.
Historic sites. What do these places mean to us? They are a living legacy and at the same time history. They are part of what made our nation the United States of America. They are also historic sites where anyone can go and be surrounded by whispers of the past. How do we memorialize such history? How do we ensure the people who lived, breathed, and spoke on such hallowed ground are remembered? How do we make sure these places which witnessed events that changed the world don't disappear? We preserve them. The places where the full story of America is told, where visitors can reflect, and where understanding and education can take place. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson signed the National Historic Preservation Act, creating the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. Historic places were disappearing, and the legislation was meant to ensure federal agencies act as responsible stewards when their actions affect historic properties. This independent federal agency has had a hand in encouraging the preservation and restoration of many important historic sites. But historic preservation can only tell the whole story of the United States if all Americans are involved. So how could the ACHP make the field of historic preservation more diverse and reflective of our nation's history? In 2017, ACHP expert member and former National Park Service Director Robert Stanton and ACHP Communications Director Susan Glimcher imagined a partnership with historically black colleges and universities and their students, designed to bring students of architecture, construction management, and related fields into historic preservation, where there is a deficit and a stunning lack of diversity.
The current stats in the profession are such that African Americans are still less than 2% of the field of architecture, and architecture students who are African American are less than 7% of the total student population in the nation. And so when we look at the data that doesn't yet exist, if you will, on historic preservation and African American inclusion, there are very few African Americans who are involved in historic preservation as a student, within the profession, or even within the academy.
In partnership with the National Park Service and the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and with support of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities, the ACHP crafted an educational internship called Preservation in Practice. Preservation in Practice began in 2018 with enthusiastic support from the Department of Architecture at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. 6 students traveled to the Western Center for Historic Preservation Training in Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming, for 2 weeks. They studied historic preservation theory and learned the skills of preservation at historic structures in the park. During their experience, the students noticed very few people who looked like them.
It's very important for black students to get into the field of historical preservation. With us already underrepresented in the field, it is very important for us to be a catalyst and a spark in the growing field of architecture, especially for not just black but other minorities, to join the field and to bring our personal experiences to help diversify the field of historical preservation.
Back in Baltimore, the students spent 2 weeks doing restoration work with the National Trust co-crew at the Peel Center, the original City Hall and the first public school in Maryland open to African American students. They visited Washington, D.C. historic sites and networked with preservation leaders.
Working in the Peel Center, we we learned that it was one of the first colored schools in Baltimore. And knowing that history and being able to go on tours such as the Frederick Douglass House and things like that, knowing that these figureheads who look like me have done so many amazing things allows me to, I guess, identify with that and dream big, just like they did.
There's no substitute, in my judgment, with hands-on experience where history actually took place. To see the home where Mr. Douglass actually slept, or to visit the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House, where she had her headquarters for the National Council of Negro Women, and knowing that these giants actually lived in that place. And that, I think, is encouraging. In fact, it's very inspiring to the young people to consider the importance of preserving this rich legacy.
In 2019, the ACHP reached out to Tuskegee University in Alabama, where the program was met with enthusiasm by the Department of Architecture and President Lily McNair. Department head and assistant professor Kwesi had in fact been working toward incorporating a minor in historic preservation into the School of Architecture. That summer, students from Tuskegee and Morgan spent time at Grand Teton. The majority of them had never been to a national park in the west of the United States, and others had never flown on an airplane. The National Park Service offered them an unparalleled opportunity, not only to learn about historic preservation, but to experience the majesty of the park itself.
On campus, they embarked on preservation projects with the National Trust's Hope Crew. Tuskegee students restored windows on a campus building, while Morgan State students restored windows at the campus chapel. When asked about their experiences, the students said the on-campus projects were meaningful because they felt they were becoming part of their school's history.
Working on the windows because the Tuskegee University was built by students, and so by continuing to build on it and rebuild on it, I feel like it is like I'm contributing to a legacy or something of that nature.
Preservation and Practice alumni have excelled in their programs, gone on to be awarded scholarships to study historic preservation in graduate school, and received internships at the national level.
Network with so many very, very successful people. I'm talking senators, I'm talking CEOs of foundations and things like that. And these people are looking out for me and my future and are reaching out to me with scholarships, with grants, with career opportunities. So that was the biggest thing that has ever happened to me, like in my entire life, because of this program.
All of the students agree that participating in the program helped foster an appreciation for preserving historic places and ensuring their story is told to future generations. For all, standing in these historic places where ordinary people, as well as giants, walked in the past, offered them an opportunity to see how they fit within the rich cultural legacy of African American history in the United States.
Historic preservation was something that I wasn't really privy to beforehand, so having this experience opened up a ton of doors and tremendous opportunities for me to see the value of me being an African American in preservation, and something I didn't even consider before or realize was a thing.
The ACHP is working to keep these exceptional students engaged through career mentoring and support, as well as building a relationship with groups such as the National Organization of Minority Architects, by eventually expanding preservation and practice to all HBCUs that have architecture programs. The ACHP and its partners will help HBCU students build richer, more meaningful careers, being mindful of the essential reasons why historic preservation matters.
The ACHP's mission is to promote the preservation and productive use of our nation's historic resources and advise the President and the Congress on national historic preservation policy. Preservation and practice contributes to that mission and brings more diversity to the field. By giving HBCU architecture students the experience in traditional trades, they will better understand how their field is complemented by historic preservation, and that preserving historic buildings connects them to their history and allows us to tell the full story of America. Bringing students into preservation philosophy, building crafts, technology, and project management skills is critical to the future of preservation. We appreciate this partnership with the National Park Service, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities.
And now,
okay, that was cool.
Special. And in that spirit, I would like to take a point of personal privilege to also recognize our colleague, Don Watson, Executive Director of the HBCU Capital Financing Program. Don is a financial genius, a wizard, and has been exceptional in helping our institutions with deferment and obtaining low-cost capital. Now, we hope that we have achieved our two goals. One, to convey heartfelt thank you to the federal and non-federal partners who support us, and to show the breadth, depth, and diversity of federal leadership in support of HBCU and HBCU competitiveness. We wish all of you Godspeed, stay safe, and stay well.